Does neoliberalism destroy the family, or does it reinforce it? For Melinda Cooper, the answer's both. Today we're going to do another book review, this time with Melinda Cooper's book, Family Values Between Neoliberalism and the New Social Conservatism. We're going to see how Melinda Cooper discusses the simultaneous destruction and reconstruction of the family under neoliberalism. So Cooper argues that for both neoliberals and neoconservatives, which are, in her view, related but distinct political traditions, the family is in perpetual crisis. Both ideological tendencies recognise that the post-war family wage, which is like, the idea of a single male breadwinner at the head of the household who brings home money for the whole family.
Also on Saturday mornings, I usually take an hour or so to go over the accounts and bills, figuring out ways to double stretch that check of mine to pay them.
And which had played such a significant role in reproducing the normative ideal of a white nuclear family, that began to break down. And as that began to break down, so too did this ideal of the nuclear family. And this crisis of the family, of the reproduction of this family ideal, required the new neoliberal state to intervene in some of the most intimate of relations to reconstruct this ideal of the family, whether in its sort of idealized nuclear form or in an assimilated kind of gay or queer form. That is, while there's a permanent crisis of the family, there's also a permanent opportunity for capitalism to reassert its power via the reconstruction of the family. Cooper points to a number of ways in which neoliberalism has pursued this reconstruction in the US, which includes, the assimilation of potentially radical social movement forces. For example, while feminist movements challenged the Fordist family wage and coalesced around inclusion in the workforce as a means to be liberated from the patriarchal power of the role of the housewife, neoliberals pursued policy programs which transformed welfare from a kind of Fordist family wage to more of a return to poor law traditions of the Victorian age, a quote, poor law tradition of private family responsibility. This tradition moved the responsibility for social reproduction out of the authoritarian and constricting hands of the state, to use neoliberal terms, and back into the realm of the private family and market. In Cooper's terms, under their influence, welfare has been transformed from a redistributive program into an immense federal apparatus for policing the private family responsibilities of the poor, while deficit spending has been steadily transferred from the state to the private family. That is to say that the housewife didn't cease existing just because suddenly she had to work. She had to both work and engage in household reproductive activity under neoliberalism. But what's interesting here is that implied beyond the familiar argument that state intervention and increasing indebtedness has reinforced the patriarchal construction of the family, there's an increased direct policing of the family too. Cooper delves further into this later in the book as she describes the heavy-handed forms of police power that are required to maintain this system of family reconstruction and gendered labour. This is, I think, a really generative insight which connects family abolition to police abolition. And we often talk about how the functions of the police is to protect commodities and the capitalist system, but with Cooper's work here, we can see a very clear example of the ways in which policing is required to maintain the reproduction of everyday life under capitalism. Which is to say, police power and family reconstruction are inherently linked. As an example of this, Cooper points to Bill Clinton's Welfare Reform Act, whereby states were now required to increase their efforts to police, track down and enforce paternity obligations on the presumption that the biological father of a child on welfare should be forced to pay child support, to be deducted from state welfare payments, whether or not the mother wished to maintain a relationship with him. And in what must be understood as a blurring of the boundaries between the free and unfree sexual contract, sanctions were to be imposed on mothers who did not sufficiently cooperate in helping welfare agencies to locate the biological father of their children. Throughout the book, Cooper traces the ways in which neoliberal and neoconservative forces have united to essentially move the responsibility for social reproduction from public or state responsibility to private and market responsibility. This, she argues, is also generative of deeply regressive trends, such as the increase of right-wing religious influence over women's healthcare and, over homeless protections as well. The increased power of people like the Salvation Army and things like that, who are bastards. Don't give money to the Salvation Army. They're bastards. Take anything else. Don't give money to the Sally Army. Fuck them. But Cooper's also keen to point out that left-wing responses to the crisis of the Fordist family wage they've often ended up falling into a conservative trap of actually reifying the family as a singular trans-historical construction, something that exists across history in a similar sense, which requires no criticism in and of itself. There's a long tradition of making arguments like capitalism destroyed the family, and so to save the family, we have to destroy capitalism. And while Cooper leaves the argument somewhat underdeveloped, the implication of this book is that instead of trying to cling to conservative ideals of a sphere of private social reproduction through the family, we should build new means of societal structure beyond the family form, which allows people not to engage in the family, which stops the family being this ideal unit of production and reproduction within capitalist and other forms of production. This is, again, an idea which I find really generative and a really good and sharp criticism of many left-wing intellectuals and movements of the past century at least. There was a time when family abolition was a central core part of a communist tradition, but then it kind of waned, and now you're kind of looked at like you've got shit on your face if you talk about it. It's not all that long since British trade unions opposed paying benefits directly to women on the grounds that it would undermine the class position and the patriarchal position of the working man. You get to absurd positions when you don't have a critical eye of what the family is and what it does. And this is all to say that Cooper's book is a really thorough and really valuable read, and I'd recommend it to anyone who's interested in any of the stuff I talk about on this channel. But there are some limitations, some fairly significant limitations, which you should probably be aware of before you dive in. Firstly, as a matter of scope, this book is focused almost exclusively on the US, which is not like a flaw per se. It's just, the specific project that Cooper's setting out to pursue. But it just means that if you're looking for a more general overview of neoliberalism and neoliberal impact on the family, you'll probably have to look beyond this book somewhat. Secondly, and I think more critically, this book does suffer from some of the same problems that a lot of studies do, where they conceptualize neoliberalism quite thinly as an ideology which is embedded in and expressed by political actors within the state or within think tanks or, within important positions. For Cooper, neoliberalism is conceptualized as the American schools of new economic liberalism that emerged at the University of Chicago, the University of Virginia, George Mason University, Virginia Polytechnic University, the UCLA Department of Economics, and various other institutional outposts in the early to mid-20th century. For Cooper, neoliberalism isn't, as I understand it, and as I try to express it on this channel, it's not a form of political hegemony which reconstructs both the material and social relations of society, like, for example, reconstructing the family, while it reconstructs the state, and through state arms and through the arms of these actors, it projects the ideological expressions of those relations. It's not that the ideology then produces the state action necessarily, but that there's a generative interaction between ideology, state, social relations, and capital. It's a much more sort of assemblage, a constellation of effects which produce neoliberalism, rather than what I see as quite often a sort of instrumentalist and kind of prescriptive idea, where, as long as you get the neoliberals out of government, then neoliberalism dies. I don't think that's quite right, and I don't think that's how neoliberalism necessarily happened. And I think it can be That's quite a common issue with some of the sort of institutional studies of neoliberalism. And it's because it's an easy story. You look at these neoliberals who are in these positions doing these things. But I think it misses the whole sort of ways in which state and hegemony work. More importantly than necessarily deficiency, I think that looking at neoliberalism with this more holistic idea means that the arguments of this book would be strengthened and deepened. If it was engaging with the fullness and messiness of neoliberal society. We'd, for example, be able to account for the innate drive to reproduce regressive racial and gendered politics as a constitutive part of neoliberal capitalist hegemony, rather than just viewing such reproduction as contingent on the actors who hold political power. And this is related to my final criticism. By viewing neoliberalism as an ideology of specific American liberalism, I think Cooper overemphasizes a distinction between neoconservatism and neoliberalism. The book argues that these two intellectual traditions essentially coalesced around the same policy prescriptions. But by holding to a strict view of these two as ideologies, as separate ideologies, I think she creates a false idealization of both, which can hide that they are fundamentally pretty much the same project. Much of our work here is indebted to Wendy Brown's history of the tensions between neoliberalism and neoconservatism, or neoliberals and neoconservatives, because she's also guilty somewhat of this institutionalized understanding. But unfortunately for Cooper, since this book was published, Brown herself wrote a whole book about how she now views the neoliberal, neoconservative division as not really there. And of course, Cooper couldn't know what Brown was going to publish later, but it does kind of undermine her argument that Brown rejected her own prior views of this division. But all of this is to say, Cooper's work really is excellent and is really well worth engaging with. The family is a critical structure in society, and we have to be aware of the ways in which it's used to uphold the entire productive arrangement of capitalism, and the ways in which it's altered in specific moments to uphold specific kinds of capitalist hegemony. The family shouldn't be reified and idealized as needing saving, but examined critically. Of course, you should also engage with Cooper's work critically, and I would warn against her, overly prescriptive understandings of neoliberalism, which reduces it from a whole wide-ranging form of political hegemony to little more than an ideology expressed through state actors. But yeah, this book, if you're interested in critical ideas of the family, or if you're interested in specific policies and very good examples of specific ways in which the state did seek to reconstruct the family, then this is a really good book to go towards. And I really enjoyed reading it, and I would fully recommend you all read it as well. And hope you've enjoyed this book review. We will continue at one point. I am going to write that family abolition video. I'm extremely busy right now. I'm currently writing a paper on neoliberalism and fascism, which I'll turn into a video at some point. Thanks for watching. Give us a like, give us a share, and we'll see you next time. I'll just do my Patreon readings in just a second when I'm off camera. And bye. Alright, thanks again for watching the video, and again, if you feel like you can, please sign up to my Patreon or give a one-off donation via PayPal or Ko-fi. All the links are in the description. I guess, is the bell still a thing? Do people still ring the bell on YouTube? I'm such a shit YouTuber, man. I don't know what's going on. Fucking, if the bell exists, ring it. That sounds... I should write a metal album called If the Bell Exists, Ring It. Anyway, I'm going off topic. Like and share as well. I'm going to read out the names of $10 and up patrons, and the names scrolling past your screen are the $5 and up. So if you like that, you can sign up to Patreon. You also get early access to videos and screenshots and book reviews like this, which are written much earlier than they are posted. This review was written months ago. Some of them were written years ago. Lots of writing. And I'll put up other stuff. Anyway, here's the names of patrons. Demo Squid, Dying of Thirst, Soval Hayes, Earl Grey Tea, Bonnie, Katie Marshall, Joshua Moldenhauer, Nina G. Public Relations, FD Signifier, Quint Wolfe, Kim Crawley, Anita Anispe, Ellis Wren, S, Hey Joe, Cameron Blakemore, Mason Colbert, Alex, Tim, Lawrence Rowland, Daniel Swing, Cyril Smid, Sammy Rodriguez, Rachel Ann, Melanie Estes, Layum, Xander Kovis, Fia Westphal, Jack, TV Skyen, Christopher Poff, Morgussie, Tom Price, Cage Barret, Esoteric Fictionalism, Austin Talman, Robin, Rachel Mixon, Duncan Skinner, Niels Abelgard, Tinfoil Pancakes, Kieran Gore, Aga Ghost, Barney Carroll, Joel, Daniel Hughes, Nelly Zacheva, J. Fraser Cartwright, Aaron, Tamash Kispeter, and Paul Singleton. Alright, and yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll hopefully get a bigger video out for you next time, but like I said, very busy. I do have to actually start writing a book that I have proposed. I said would be finished by December. It's not going to be finished by December. Don't tell the people who are reviewing it, but you know, we move. But I'll try and get a bigger video out next time, but we'll see. Thanks again. Bye. Love you.